Morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Lithium-ion Batteries, Risks and Mitigation Guidance for your customers. Before we get started today, just wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. So if you've joined the presentation using your computer's speaker system by default, if you prefer, you can dial in using your telephone and just select telephone in the audio pane, and then the dial-in information will be displayed. We will be taking questions, but that will be at the end of the presentation. But you've got an opportunity to submit a question at any point during the call. So if you just go to the question panel, and then you can type in your question, and then we can come to that at the end of the presentation. So I will now hand over to Madeleine to start today's presentation.
Thank you, Max. So my name is Madeleine Cavanagh. I'm in the loss control team at Allianz. So just to the agenda, if you could go on to the next slide, please. The agenda today, I'll be handing over to Becky, Rogers and John to take you through some information about claims and underwriting. And then I will be doing the most important session, which is supporting you and your customers. But I would say that because that's my bit. So if we start on the next slide, please. So really, just very basically, wanted to talk to you about lithium-ion batteries and what they are and what they do. So if we go on to the main slide, please. So basically, we've got 4 types of lithium-ion batteries. The cylindrical and the button are probably the most common ones that you come across. The other 2, probably not so much. The pouch one in particular, just to mention, is more prone to damage. It hasn't got that hard outer casing to protect it. So just to point that one out, really. And then really to make you aware that within lithium-ion batteries, there's lots of different chemistries. And each different chemistry has different properties, so useful for different things. So, for example, lithium-ion phosphate is considered more stable than NMC technology, so nickel, manganese, cobalt. But lithium-ion phosphate still can develop a thermal runaway, and I'll talk to you more about thermal runaway very shortly. Next slide, please. So as you can see from the slide, basically lithium-ion batteries are used in various devices. You will have a number in your office, in your home, everywhere, to be quite honest with you now. The reason that they're so popular is that they have a very high energy density. So as a comparison to a lead acid battery, you've probably got about 5 times the energy density. Low discharge, self-discharge rate, so they make very efficient use of the energy. Lightweight, low maintenance, and they have high cell voltage compared to other batteries, so can be used in high power applications. So as you can see from that list, various devices and very, very widespread. Next slide, please. So we really wanted to talk to you about what we're seeing, what we're hearing about in the industry, and basically how fires start and what you can do about it. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. So this is really from our experience and what we've learned about lithium-ion batteries. Fires quite often start when batteries are being charged. One of the most prolific effects of a fire seems to be when a battery is damaged. So that could be physically or chemical abuse. And one of the unusual things with these batteries is that a thermal runaway can occur a long time afterwards. So the battery could be damaged, you may not know it's been damaged, and then a thermal runaway can occur. The other cause of fires that we've experienced is end-of-life batteries, and possibly manufacturing faults and defects. So that they're sort of the main risks and the main times when we really need to be aware that a fire could start from a lithium-ion battery. If you could just go on to the next slide, please. So this is just one of the definitions for a thermal runaway. So you probably hear me talking about thermal runaway quite a bit. So this is one of the definitions, but basically it is a self-sustaining fire event. So it produces oxygen to sustain itself and keep burning, basically. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's lots of debate around whether the risk of lithium-ion batteries is worse than any other type of battery. At the moment, there's extremely limited data to say whether that is true or not. So not really going to go into that today. I think what we can definitely say, what we are seeing and what others are seeing in the industry, is that the severity once a fire starts where a lithium-ion battery is involved is far greater. This is for a number of reasons. Lithium-ion battery fire is extremely difficult to extinguish. Speak to anybody in a fire and rescue service and they will tell you this. Once a fire starts and is extinguished, the fire can restart sometimes hours after the event. So it can look as though the fire has been extinguished, but then you can actually have another fire start or the same fire reoccur. The fire event produces greater heat than other types of fires. Plus, it tends to be over a much longer period of time. So Becky's going to talk to you about some of the claims that we've experienced, but just wanted to point this out that we are seeing far greater damage than when it's what could be called a traditional fire event. Toxic gases. So this is from a, we're talking to you today from a property point of view, but I just felt as though I needed to mention the health and safety briefly. There's some really toxic gases that are released, in particular hydrogen fluoride, which is particularly nasty, highly toxic, corrosive and colourless. So you may not even know it's there. It can take a long time to ventilate or disperse. So you really do not want to be going into a building where there has been a release of hydrogen fluoride. When it mixes with water, it becomes hydrofluoric acid, which I'm sure many of you'll know is particularly nasty as well. One of the problems as well is that the gases that are released can be, depending on the chemistry of the battery, they can be lighter or denser than air. So it's difficult to anticipate how to ventilate those gases. And also we have been made aware that sometimes there isn't a fire initially. The gases accumulate, form a vapor cloud and can move, seek a fire, an inception hazard, an inception source, and then there is the potential for a really nasty explosion. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to pass on to Becky now to talk to you about claims, trends and some case studies. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, Maddie. So hi everyone, I'm Becky Rogers, Head of Property Claims at Alliance Commercial Claims. So Today, I'm going to talk to you just about some cases that we've received really within the last year and actually more recently as well. And just not to obviously scaremonger, it's more about severity. We're not seeing a huge increase in claims due to lithium batteries, but when we do get them, the severity of the claim is eye-watering numbers. So it's really just to go through some claim examples and talk to you really just about the extent of damage and things that we're having to consider from a claims perspective, and I suppose really how you can help us and really understand that risk and how we can try and prevent these claims from occurring in the first place. So if we just go on to the next slide, Max. So this case involved a case where we insured we were a property owner, and where there was some wheelchairs in the property, which storage of lithium batteries from the wheelchairs was actually placed in a plastic container. So the customer did comply with the requirements. What happened was that the fire was quite localised, but the actual chemical reaction and the batteries burned, it spread through the office areas, corroding the steel beams. And if we just go on to the next slide, so you can really see the extent of the damage. So we have a massive amount of damage here. This claim came in at about £17.5 million. That include business interruption as part of that reserve. The actual building element was about £13.5 million. It's a complete total loss. And what we found is that the actual toxic, the chemical reaction of the toxic material that was left deemed the whole property beyond economical repair. So it's actually the toxicity of what the residue that's left. In most fire claims, we can, get equipment in, we can try and save and, smoke damage. But with these types of claims, we're finding that actually it deems the whole area completely, beyond repair, and we have to start from scratch. So this one was, as I say, the insured complied, and it was the lithium batteries within wheelchairs, which sparked and went off like a firework, really, and caused this type of damage. If we can go on to the next one, Max, please. And we've had this case we've had a couple of motor trade risks, which again causes extensive damage, and this one resulted in an actual Audi battery, which it just ignited. It was removed from the car at the time, and it caused significant damage. And again, this was, not an insignificant number at 1.5 million. We were sharing that one on a co-insurance basis at 50%. So it was a £3 million loss. So it's just, this was a battery. We're looking into whether there's any potential recovery from the manufacturers of the Audi car, the vehicle. It's difficult though, because what we're finding as well with these recovery opportunities is actually the extent of the damage is so bad we haven't got the evidence to then go to the Audi manufacturer. But what I would like to add on that point is that we have had some success in our Alliance France OE, and what we found is that they've actually managed to successfully recover against Mercedes. So we're going to be working with Alliance France just to understand the types of evidence that they had to secure that recovery. So that's one that we're going to be looking at, and if there's any learnings from that. So that's definitely one for us to look at and really understand how they were successful there. And if we just go on to the next slide. Again, this was another motor trade. So what we have seen is that unfortunately the fires are sort of occurring on the motor trade book. So this one was due to a Makita drill. So a well-known make, a really sort of high sort of net worth type make, a good make. So, and obviously this occurred in this garage, causing a lot of damage. But again, this was a not insignificant £250,000 claim. But it's really just to understand actually what we could have done really from a point of view, from a customer perspective, to prevent that damage occurring. And this is where the work that we're doing from a lessons learned perspective. And just really recently, I'd just like to add from a claims perspective that when we deal with these cases, we're actually using obviously our adjusting panel, we're using experts. But only in the recent last 3 weeks, we've had a highest number of reserves that went on due to fire. One of them was a £5 million fire claim. That again was unfortunately on a motor trade business, and that was due to a lithium battery which actually just went up again like a firework. And this was to do with a Jaguar Land Rover batteries, 16 batteries stored together, waiting for Land Rover to pick these batteries up. And unfortunately, one of them went off, and the actual fire contamination was really bad on that case. It was on a garage type MOT type policy. And I would say that this one was where we have to be really careful from a claims perspective. We go out on site, so my team will go out on site with the adjuster. Our engineers, motor engineers, will also go outside, but we're having to be so careful. And Maddie just alluded to this a moment ago, is that we've got to be really careful about the health and safety of our people and also the customer. And obviously you guys will sometimes go out on site as well and meet us. If there's a large claim, we've got to be careful. We can't be going into these buildings because of the toxics, even wearing the proper PPE isn't working. So we have to be really careful, do all the right risk assessments and protect our people, as you know, obviously yourselves and Alliance as well. And what I'd like to say as well, in the last couple of weeks, we have had 2 significant claims, which we ended up putting on 35 million in estimates just in 1 week, which was a record for my property major loss team. And as I say, I don't want to scaremonger today about the claims. The claims volumes are low as a result of lithium batteries. We have seen an increase due to fire, and fire is probably the most prevalent peril within the major loss space, so that's claims over 250. But there's a whole mixture of different causes. So I'm not here to scaremonger, but it's really just to be realise, you know, what we insure, the business, and actually how we can help our customers prevent these damages, this damage occurring. Because obviously the amount of time for, you know, the business getting back up and running on a loss that's 25 million is going to take that customer some time. And it was a business, a car giant type place that has got extensive damage. And obviously the business interruption is a large part of that claim. So we just need to be alert, really understand what we're insuring from an underwriting point of view, but from a broker point of view as well, and really learning what we're seeing from these types of losses. What can we do to prevent these types of claims happen again? Our customers don't want them. Obviously, we want to help our customers prevent them because these are labour intensive cases. And it, you know, obviously we want these businesses to survive. So we're having to look at different ways of dealing with these cases, thinking about increased cost of working, how can we get that business back up and running, alternate premises. So it's all things that we're thinking. We've got to try and get this business back up and running. We don't want customers, businesses failing. We want to try and help them as much as we can. So we're really thinking outside the box on these types of claims. And I think that was my slides. I'm not sure if there's one more. I think what I'm going to do now, everyone, is pass over to John Wray, who's going to talk to you about our underwriting considerations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Becca. Yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm John Wray. I'm a property underwriting manager with Alliance. Just to recap before we get into these considerations, I thought it might be worth just briefly thinking about why these are a bit of an issue for us. Again, especially lithium-ion batteries, they're very cheap to produce. They can store a large amount of energy in a very compact form, and they're rechargeable, which makes them very attractive to a number of industries. And as a result, they've kind of become ubiquitous in society. They're everywhere, as we've already spoken about in the presentation. What I want to try and, I guess, work and help you with is to identify where there's an enhanced exposure and what we can do to manage that exposure, and the kind of underwriting information we've looked to manage as a result of that, and really with a focus on UK risks is where I'm thinking today. So if we could just jump on a couple of slides. Yeah, so sorry, that's just the kind of list of considerations we'll work through, and we'll look through those kind of one by one now. So if we could move on firstly to the next slide, please, Max. So manufacturing of lithium-ion batteries, I guess starting from the beginning, it's not something we are seeing an awful lot of in the UK at the moment. The lead is kind of taken in the Asian Pacific region, and China are probably the largest manufacturer of these batteries. So, you know, talking about this from the UK perspective, it's not something we're seeing yet, but there's every possibility that could change in years to come. And the kind of key point to call out here is that new batteries themselves generally not seen as hazardous or as potentially damaged or batteries towards the end of their life. but that's not to say there's not an enhanced risk. And as with any manufacturing process, safe storage, effective fire protections, or they're all the kind of considerations we'll be looking at in the manufacturing space. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Matt. So kind of following on from that, I guess in the chain of supply would be the wholesale of the batteries themselves. So you may see some of this in the UK, whilst we're not seeing the manufacturing, that the wholesale of batteries is a risk and an exposure and an industry we can expect to see increasingly emerge in the UK. Again, just to play on the previous points, we're talking about new batteries here, so they're generally less likely to have been damaged. However, given that they're likely to have been manufactured overseas, there's a very real risk of a transit damage being caused to the battery. So probably the things we need to be thinking about here and what we want to help you to manage is establishing a good inspection and then quarantining of batteries where we feel they may be potentially damaged. Probably all I wanted to say on wholesalers, Max, so if we could move on to the next slide. So this is where we kind of start to get into where we're going to be likely to be seeing these risks in the UK. So wholesale of goods containing lithium-ion batteries, whether we're sort of thinking phones, e-bikes, e-scooters, general electrical devices, vapes, all those kinds of things all contain lithium-ion batteries. One of the kind of things I want to call out is that the problems you might face, and what we want to try and help you with is identifying where this is a key exposure. Now, this will vary depending on the type of supplier. If you've got an Amazon type wholesaler, they will be supplying anything and everything, and trying to draw out where they've got lithium-ion battery exposure is a little bit more difficult. There are more obvious places where it will be an exposure, and that's likely to be, and as I mentioned, mobile phones, e-bikes, e-scooters. Some of the key considerations to think about here are, if we're talking about new goods, generally they're encased within a product, they're integral to it, so they generally have some protection from the product itself. But again, it's really, really important that we understand that there's a good regime introduced by your clients to look for signs of damage, a really good inspection regime, management of any pre-supply charging, which can sometimes happen en masse with these types of suppliers, and then key would be appropriate storage controls, including quarantining of damaged products. If we think back to the claims examples we've seen, dare I say, lessons learned from that might have been a really well-established, good external quarantining. The fire may still have occurred, but it would have been contained in a smaller area, would have caused less damage to your client's property. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Matt. So this is the area that's probably been giving us most problems in the UK, if I'm completely honest with you. Again, and it plays back to the kind of claims examples we gave. It's a bit of a broad area, but what we're talking about here is retail. And in the retail sector, what you might find is, particularly if there's sort of trade-ins or if it's new goods, there might be some return or product recalls of damaged batteries that the original supplier may be required to handle or supply onto a specialist to fix. So we may see that being introduced into the exposures. In the kind of hire environment, if you think of tool hire and the like, these things are coming back on a regular basis, maybe manhandled, dropped, potentially damaged. So really, really key and important that there's a good inspection and diagnostic testing of the equipment that comes back from hire, and if it is found to be damaged, again, some external storage or quarantining is probably a key way of managing that potential damage. And then kind of service and repair. So this is generally here, this is going to be undertaken on either faulty or, as I mentioned, product recall, potentially in electric vehicles. We're starting to see some of that now, where the batteries are either failing or not producing the charge they should be. They're being returned to the main dealer. They may sit there until they're able to be worked upon. And, ideally what we want is a really strict, effective way of quarantining, diagnostic, visual checks. If there's any suspicion of any damage or known damage, ideally we want to see these stored externally, a long way from the building, so any potential fire can be contained. Unattended charging, again, not a great feature, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. Banks of goods being charged overnight is potentially a fire hazard waiting to happen. And, we will talk about the support we can provide you in later slides, but effective control of that, ideally using fire-approved charging cabinets wherever possible, is a really good way of controlling that exposure. Next slide, please. So talk a little bit about BESS. This may be a term you've come across. It generally kind of goes hand in hand with solar panels. So devices that enable energy from renewables, solar, wind, etc., to be stored and the surplus energy can then be released for a later usage. Obviously, it's starting to gain favour now in a sustainable push and drive, both in the UK and globally. So we've seen it, chiefly originally in the renewable sector, but it's now starting to creep and be seen more in manufacturing and wholesale. It's a way, as I say, of storing energy for future use, and that sort of appeal to a large manufacturer or wholesale with a lot of solar panels on their building. So it's sustainable, it's efficient, it's money saving. So we're going to see more and more of this in the UK. The kind of key point I would call out here is, if your clients are thinking about having this work done, or they're telling you, look, I'm going to be commissioning to have solar panels installed either on an existing or a new building, please talk to us, talk to the loss control contacts you have within your insurer friends, and we can work with you to find a really good risk managed, safe installation. Again, the preference with any of these, because there will be exposure to lithium-ion batteries in the storage system, is that are external to the main building, so it can contain any potential damage. Next slide, please, Max. Kind of final point I wanted to cover is a bit of a generic term, but it's something that manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, pretty much all of us will see this day to day in use, and it's the exposure from plant and machinery, whether that be forklift trucks, handheld scanners in a wholesale risk, hand tools being used day to day in the business. So it's used in manufacturing, wholesale, and retail. It's something that's, to an extent, with the ubiquitous nature of the batteries in the UK, that we can't avoid. It's happening, it's growing. Key is how we control it, and I'll just touch on some of the key kind of points there. Avoid wherever possible unattended charging. Keep clear from combustibles. Dedicated cabinets can be provided for safer charging of the units. Use only OEM, original equipment manufacturer chargers and approved chargers by the manufacturers, and charge on non-combustible surfaces. There's some very easy kind of key steps that can be taken to mitigate against the damage of what is, we feel, an inevitable exposure. I think that might be my final slide, Max, but if we can just move on to check. Yeah, I think that's it from me. So I'll now pass back to you, Madeleine.
Thanks, John. Right, so if you could just go to the next slide, please. I suppose from my point of view, this is the most important thing, and John and Becky have both touched on this. So really, what can we do to help you, to help your customers, is the essence of this. Just really wanted to say to start with that it's getting the basics right. So fundamentally, education is the biggest thing here, and from the point of view that I would like to talk to everybody about this. Well, I'm sure everybody wouldn't like to listen to me talking about it, but I'm hoping that if I talk to you about it, you can then talk to somebody else about it, and that's the way people learn about it and get the information. So, like any risk, lithium-ion batteries, there is some simple solutions, and there is some more proprietary, more expensive solutions, I suppose. Really depends on the risk that we're looking at the time. So the pictures on the left are some examples of some very simple and cheap recommendations that we can make. So specifically with regards to faulty, damaged, end-of-life batteries, external sort of quarantine, containment has got to be the way forward. So the picture on the left is it's a simple metal box that can be stored well away from any buildings and essential plant. And the two pictures next to it, vermiculite and then a proprietary glass bubble or glass balls or anything like that. Basically some sort of insulation that's non-combustible and non-conductive to pack around the batteries to try and prevent damage. The pictures on the right are from our preferred supplier, MTES. So proprietary cabinets that can be used for storage, can be used for charging of lithium-ion batteries, testing of lithium-ion batteries, that sort of thing. So generally we would look for 90 minutes fire resistance, and you can possibly just make out on the picture on the right. They can incorporate fire detection, they can incorporate fire protection, fire suppression, for example, which really on larger scale risks is a real sort of positive and a good way of managing the risk. So that NTES and other suppliers can have build these bespoke to customers' requirements, or they have stock of products on the shelves. So they are one of the sort of options out there. Next slide, please. Within our business risk support part of the website, we've got information on there specifically with regards to lithium-ion batteries, but also e-bikes and e-scooters. This is where we're seeing a lot of fires at the moment, and it is a real cause for concern. So the slide mentions the NFCC. They've got some really good guidance on e-bikes and e-scooters, and I would definitely recommend having a look at that if you've got any customers that have stocks or employees using e-bikes and e-scooters. The main areas of concern, as I talked about earlier, are where batteries are faulty, damaged, or end of life, and whilst they're being charged. So e-bikes, e-scooters particularly are prone to damaged batteries, and possibly employees or people buying batteries that aren't of the same quality as you would normally see. And again, that's another cause of fires where there's manufacturing defects. Risk Authority, again, really good source of information. There's lots of information on there about lithium-ion batteries and electric vehicle charging. So definitely have a look at those websites. And if you need any more information, I think, as John said earlier, please contact us and we can supply some more information. All of our loss of control engineers are talking about this on a daily basis. So, it is really important that we get this information out there and everybody speaks to customers about it. Next slide, please. So you'll be pleased to know this is my final slide. Electrical safety first, again, absolutely brilliant source of information. So there's a quote there which is taken from their battery breakdown article, white paper. And I think from that you can see that these lithium-ion batteries are causing real problems in the UK and around the rest of the world. So Electrical Safety First are very good at the education piece and getting that information across. And I think one of the statistics that really sticks in my mind is that according to their calculations, an e-bike or e-scooter battery stores the same amount of energy as 6 hand grenades. So if you take anything away from this presentation, hopefully that will stick in your mind because it is extremely alarming. The other thing that just wanted to mention is that standards legislation haven't yet caught up. However, the King's Speech this year did announce the Product Safety Bill, which I think is a really good first step, starting point in the production of legislation and standards with regards to lithium-ion batteries. On the right of this slide, there is some other sources of information. As I said before, the NFCC are really, really good. They have some really good guidance on their website. Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm honestly not on commission for this YouTube video, but I would always recommend anybody have a look at it. It's very basic, very easy to understand. So it's a good source of information for insureds to use for their employees, so that they're aware of the risks. And as I say, it's very straightforward. It's 5-10 minutes long, so it's not very long at all. Again, electrical safety first. There is some really good information on their website, including some first-hand experiences and some videos that are really the stuff of nightmares. So they're worth having a look at. Again, recommending to insureds and customers for them to look at and for them to recommend to their employees to look at. And now I think we are going to take some questions. So if I can pass back to you, Max.
Thanks, Maddie. Quite a few people have asked if we're going to be sending a copy of the slides afterwards. Yes, we will be. So you'll have a copy of the slides and the recording, so you can share those with your colleagues and you can refer back to them as and when you want to. What I'll do, I'll just pose the questions, and then whoever feels like equipped to answer them, bear with, and I will just run through. So one of the first questions we got are concrete buildings more resistant against these corrosive vapours? I guess that's one for you, Maddie.
Well, it's probably one for me. Concrete buildings, as you know, all risk managers, loss control engineers like concrete buildings. So yes, they are. But I think Becky will probably say that we have had some experience of some corrosive effects on concrete.
Yeah, we have had claims where the concrete's been damaged, and what we found is that the usual techniques of trying to remove the toxic residue that it leaves behind has not been possible. So actually, it's a really highly toxic material that's left. It's hard to get rid of. So whilst, yes, it contains, it's actually that the actual internal damage is more severe than you'd expect with a normal fire. So that's what's making the claims cost so much more. So it's not about, it does contain it, but within that area, it's still damaged and it deems it beyond repair or restoration of any sorts. So yeah, it's a matter of then complete reinstatement.
Okay, thank you. Right, so the next question, given the risks involved, would you recommend setting up an electric vehicle charging point internally in a garage or outside your home? I guess more EV related there.
Yes, well, personally, I don't think we should be encouraging anybody to have an EV charger inside a garage. I don't think it's a good idea to have one on the external wall of your home either. To be quite honest, from a personal point of view, I'd be more concerned about the battery in the vehicle than the actual charger. If the charging is installed correctly by a competent company and a proprietary product is used, then there shouldn't be any problems with the charger. It's the battery really in the vehicle that's that we're seeing problems with.
Thank you. Next question is, what would you recommend as a percentage state of charge when storing batteries?
That's a very difficult one because there is lots of guidance out there. So the state of charge for transporting vehicles, transporting batteries in vehicles, from memory, I think it's 40%, but we can't actually find any background to know what that's based on. So obviously, if you're transporting batteries, or if you're storing batteries, then you want them charged in accordance with the manufacturer's guidance recommendations, and the least energy that's in there is better, but on the other hand, you don't want them depleting, and then they become in a dangerous state. So it really depends on the type of battery and what you're actually doing with it as to what the state of charge should be.
Thank you. Next one is, have you heard of using salt water to manage the risk?
We have heard of using salt water to manage the risk. I think this was something that was done more in Europe than the UK. Again, not actually sure what the testing is behind this, but we are being told by the Fire and Rescue Service that water is still the best medium for extinguishing these fires.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the 90-minute fire resistant for the energy of burning papers for the cabinets? I guess these are the storage cabinets you were referencing, or or at the 80 degrees of burning lithium batteries?
Sorry, can you repeat that one, Max? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's basically, is the design of the cabinets designed for lithium-ion batteries or burning paper?
Oh, right, sorry, yes. Well, MTES have done fire testing themselves on the cabinets that we recommend, and they are specifically for lithium-ion batteries. So yes, it is specific to fire from a lithium-ion battery.
Thank you. Just checking to see what. Do you offer any risk engineering support for the construction of battery facilities, gigafactories?
We can offer some support. Obviously, this is a highly technical area of trade, but we can offer some support, and globally, we do offer support in those type of trades.
Okay. The next question is there a claim vector for mobile phone or laptop batteries catching fire whilst docked on employees' desks in an office environment? And then, do you have advice for dealing with blown batteries that are bulging out of their casing in an office environment?
Well, I'll just pick up the bulging batteries to start with. Bulging batteries is a sign that there is something serious going wrong with that battery. So if it can be safely removed, then it should be safely removed and disposed of. Bulging, any signs of sort of changes in the battery physically, or any smells or anything like that coming from a battery, is an indication that there is a fault. So any batteries that are showing those sort of signs should be removed, you know, definitely from the office as soon as possible. So if anybody's got any in the desk drawers, please, yes, dispose of them safely.
And I would add that we've not really seen any office fires as a result of lithium batteries as yet. But what I would add is that we have seen, so from a purely, and I suppose this will resonate with all of us, in the LV personal business, so Allianz Personal, you know, I talk to my colleagues all the time over on that side of the business, and they've seen, you know, in a domestic type property, and this could obviously relate to property owners, residential landlord type policies, where someone just had a Dyson vacuum, which could be in any type of property, and the battery was expensive to replace, so they bought a cheaper one. We know that Dysons are expensive, but the actual battery, they needed to replace it. So rather than buy the Dyson battery off the website. A customer bought a battery which was obviously not, it wasn't the same manufacturer at all, it was someone completely different, and they left their battery, the vacuum on charge, left the home, and then came back, and the property had significant fire damage where the battery was stored in the utility room. And whilst it was contained to 1 or 2 rooms, the smoke damage made a claim on it was a 3-bedroom semi-detached property for about £500,000. So it can happen in everyday life, and I think it resonates with all of us, doesn't it, when you think about what we've got at home, and really trying to be preventative of these types of scenarios happening. So I think from an office point, we go back to that scenario, it's really just not using the wrong chargers. It's basic, or it's going back to basics again, and just being alert to any signs of obviously the bulging or anything like that that could cause issues. But as I said, on the office side of the commercial business, we've not seen any fires yet as a result of lithium batteries.
Thanks, Becky. I think you must have seen some of the questions, because we got asked whether or not we've had any in a residential fires. So I think you've just covered that. So
yeah,
thank you.
I think, and just to add on that point as well, I think we are really looking at how we can signpost better with our customers. So I know that the Alliance Personal guys are really looking at signposting lots of helpful information, because it's just the basic stuff that we all need, isn't it? You know, I've learned quite a lot from following these claims. But yeah, it's just being alert, isn't it? And us all understanding, you know, about, we've all got power, you know, a lot of us have got power tools at home, and you've got your lawn mowers and things like that. It's all those types of risks that poses in anyone's property.
I think the other thing just to mention as well, going back to the office risk, you know, employees coming into the office with their own personal devices, you know, the owner of the business probably doesn't know whether they're good quality batteries, what charge is being used, that sort of thing. So it may be the case that those devices aren't controlled quite as well as their own devices, and we have seen some evidence of that in trades where we've been going out and doing surveys. So it's really that education piece, and trying to get this information across to everybody, not just the owners of the business, everybody in that business as well. And you know, as I say, I'm not on commission, but the Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue video on YouTube is particularly good from that point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Madeleine. If I could just also add there, talking about residential losses and residential exposures, I think e-bikes and e-scooters are one of our highest concerns. We have issued a separate risk management document. It's in the slide. There's a link earlier in the pack. You can go to and read it if you haven't already seen it, and there's links to various sources of material that can give really good practical steps about trying to safely manage the charging of e-bikes and e-scooters, because that is an evolving, very quickly evolving area of concern for us, where we're starting to see a lot of fires, and some quotes from Madeleine about the amount of damage and, you know, life safety issues as well that comes with that. So sort of stress to read our guidance, read our documentation on that, and speak to us if you've got any concerns, please.
Thank you. Next question is, how hot is a battery fire? I don't know if any of you could answer that one.
I can't tell you in degrees. It's hot. It's hot. So we believe that, again, there's lots of information out there. We believe that the heat is greater with a lithium-ion battery fire than a traditional fire, and we understand that the heat is greater for a longer period of time than in a traditional fire. So that heat generated, I suppose the graph, I could have shown a graph, but it tends to not reduce as quickly as a traditional fire. I hope that answers the question okay, but if not, you know, if anybody wants to come back to me afterwards, I'm happy to talk to them about it.
Thank you. Next one, do dead flat batteries still pose a fire risk, or is there a small charge still in it?
There's definitely a small charge still in the battery. Even if the battery's dead, there is some energy still contained within that. A lot of the fires in waste and refuse disposal sites are caused from lithium-ion batteries, and most of those batteries are probably thought to be dead, no energy left in them, but unfortunately that isn't the case. So even if you think it's a dead battery, there will be some energy in there.
Okay, thank you. I think this one's for John. What is the underwriting take on VNA, etc., lithium trucks in large warehouses and charging? These vehicles are not really capable of going out across the yard for charging, and charging always takes place inside. Very high energy storage in these.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's similar to forklift trucks. I think really what we ideally want to see is a good clearance from combustible materials. Appreciate the practicalities of taking those externally can present a challenge. But yeah, there are options available in kind of enclosures or dedicated areas that are non-combustible that again can contain any potential fire with this. If it's being done en masse, then there may be storage and space considerations, but our recommendation would be that this is again in some way isolated away from the rest of the business and is in a fireproofed enclosure or room or suitable area that going to contain the spread of fire should the worst happen. And ideally, it isn't done unattended or overnight. But again, appreciate that if these are in use during the day, there is often a need to do the charging outside of business hours. But we would strongly recommend against that because having the ability to monitor these whilst they're being charged is, hugely beneficial in being able to mitigate any damage. But if it has to be done, it needs to be done safely and preferably in an enclosed area within the building that's suitably fire protected.
There is probably other mitigation techniques that could be used as well, in addition to what John's saying. So, fire detection, fire protection, sprinkler protection, that sort of thing. So there is sort of solutions to these problems. And as John says, it's just a matter of trying to deploy the right ones.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, so we will still answer a couple of questions, but if we don't get to your question, we will come back to you directly after the call, so don't worry, we will answer your question. I've got another one here that says, how do you know when it's near end of life? I'm guessing that it's the battery we're referring to here.
So the manufacturer's instructions should give you a lifespan or an indication of the lifespan. At the moment, lots of companies are using charge. So if the battery takes the charge, they're using that as an indication of whether the battery is still safe and usable. If a battery isn't taking charge, or it's not charging fully, not charging properly, then that is definitely an indication that it's nearing the end of its life. And at that point, that's when you need to be concerned.
Thank you. I've got do BESS generally need to be serviced given there is no working parts? Is this something you would typically expect or apply conditions on? Is that one for you, John?
Shall I just start off on that, whether it needs to be serviced?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely needs to be maintained and serviced as any other electrical system would need to be maintained and serviced. So, but from I'll let John sort of continue with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, generally our approach on this is always to work in collaboration with you and the client to work to an agreed and safe way of managing the risk and to understand that there is an inspection and maintenance program in force rather than relying on a policy conditional clauses. But there are instances when we may need to introduce that to support something that we found following a survey or a process or procedure you've told us your client is doing. Sometimes we may need to endorse the policy just to reinforce that continues. That's generally our approach to it. But I think, I just want to really just sort of say we want to work with you and your client to to get an agreement and an understanding that this is how it's going to be done, rather than relying upon a policy condition. That's kind of our ethos here.
Definitely. I think I'm right in saying, John, that, you know, if we can be involved at a very early stage with
Definitely,
any customers that are wanting to install BESS, and, you know, we can talk to them at that stage about where it's installed, the maintenance, that sort of thing. So that's really key to you know, working with customers.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, you know, just to kind of put your minds at rest as well, you know, Allianz and our loss control approach to surveying and working with you, we don't charge a fee for this. It's kind of part of the service we provide. You know, a good loss control when it's risk managed approach is in everyone's interest, and there aren't any additional costs involved in this. It's just part of managing the risk, which is in all of our interests.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm going to do one last question. Do you have any thoughts on the efficiency of lithium-X extinguishers? Should these be recommended wherever there is a significant risk, e.g. a large number of batteries, charging banks, etc.?
I thought we might get a question on this. We wouldn't recommend, we would not be putting a recommendation forward for lithium-X extinguishers or anything similar to that, unless it was for life safety purposes. So any fire extinguisher or anything like that should really be used for life safety purposes only, for means of escape from a building or an area of the building. We would not expect any employees or anybody to start fighting a fire, and especially not a lithium-ion battery fire. There could be cases where a fire blanket, a proprietary lithium-ion battery fire blanket, could be of use, but again, that wouldn't be where there is an active fire event occurring. That could be as a precaution. So we wouldn't be recommending that as a matter of course, as I say, except for life safety purposes and escape means.
Okie dokes. Thank you. Thank you, Madeleine. Right, I think we're going to wrap this up for today, but like the presenter said, if you've got any further questions, please do reach out, get in contact. More than happy to help. And I know that we didn't get through all the questions that were put forward today, but we will get back in touch with you and we will answer them individually after the call. And of course, we will be sending a copy of the slides and the recordings out to everybody that registered, even if they weren't able to attend today. So thank you very much, and thank you to our experts, and I wish you a happy Friday. Thank you.